To all co-citizens, true patriots, and last-minute men, this is an urgent wartime dispatch from the high desert basin of California, USA. The flag is being displayed upside down in accord with United States Code, Title 36, Section 176, Subdivision A. The flag should never be displayed with the Union down, except as a signal of dire distress and instances of extreme danger. Co-citizens, the Union is now in extreme danger. The fundamental principles on which our Union was built, the ideas that constitute our Union and make us a nation, are now under direct attack. The Union is in dire distress. Our Union was founded in opposition to an all-powerful government, a king. The king could rule as he wanted, and there was no limit on his power over the colonists. The ancestors of our Union said, "We're not going to live like this. We're not going to be governed by this unaccountable power." They took it upon themselves to overthrow that anti-democratic power and to constitute a new union, a union in which the power of the government is not absolute. Government's power is limited in this union. That is the most basic principle in the Constitution of our union. Government power is limited. That's why we're a union. The limits on government power are written directly into the rule book of the union, the Constitution. The Constitution is the rule book of our union, and that rule book limits government power. Specifically, in two general ways, government power is limited. First, the power of government is limited by individual rights. Written into the rule book are individual rights that the government cannot trample on without due process of law. The government cannot invade individuals' lives and personal affairs without first going to a court and presenting a good reason to invade lives. Due process of law. Whether the court makes the right decision or not, the fact that the government has to go to court is a limit on government power written into our Constitution. Another way government power is limited right in the rulebook of the Union is by breaking the government up into three parts with equivalent amounts of power. Each of the three parts, the executive, the legislature, and the courts, are checked and balanced so that power is spread out among them. And this is a limit on government power. Power can't be too centralized. It's spread out among the three branches. And again, that's all in the rule book, right in the Constitution of our Union. If we don't have that, then we don't have our Union. Co-citizens, we are now in the process of losing our Union. Our Union is in dire distress, extreme danger, because of the executive branch of government. The President, the one who is supposed to preside over the government, has, at this point in time, unilaterally declared himself to be the Lord of the government. A Lord who can do whatever he deems fit without regard to the limits that are at the core of our Union, written in the rule book. As it stands now, the dear leader has decreed that the rule book, the Constitution, does not apply to him. So our rule book limits government power, again, in two ways, by individual rights and by breaking up the government into parts that balance and check each other. The dear leader is ignoring both of these limits on his power. For instance, with regard to the individual, in the rule book, the Fourth Amendment says the government cannot invade individual lives, cannot search and seize and get into your stuff without due process of law. Now, a search and a seizure includes a wiretap, listening in on your conversation. That's the government intruding in your life. Now, the government can search and seize individuals, but in order to do so, they have to go through due process of law. They have to present to a neutral court a good enough reason that the court can say, okay, that's a good enough reason to invade this individual's life, so yes, you can go ahead and do it. But the dear leader says, no, he doesn't have to go through due process of law. If he wants to wiretap somebody, if he wants to invade a person's life, he says he has the right to do it, and the Constitution won't stop him. So we have the leader of our government basically saying that limit on my power written into the rule book doesn't apply to me. I have that power. I have unlimited power with regard to that provision. The other way, as mentioned before, that our Union limits the President's power is by requiring him to follow laws passed by Congress. That's the check and balance of the legislature against the executive, but not the dear leader. He says he does not have to follow laws passed by Congress. For instance, In the 1970s, Congress passed a law saying the president could wiretap Americans, but he had to get a warrant. He could go to this specially set up, super secret, convenient, and lenient court, get a warrant, and then the president can wiretap. But the dear leader says, you know what, that law doesn't apply to me. I'll wiretap whoever I want without getting a warrant. Through some super easy court or not, I don't need to get a warrant to wiretap Americans. I don't have to follow the law passed by Congress. Again, another check and balance on governmental power built into our rule book the dear leader ignores. And finally, the other branch of the government, the courts, is another way that the president's power is supposed to be limited. If someone has a problem with the president, they go to court, the courts work it out, make a decision whether the president is abusing his power or not. But again, the dear leader is not going to go with that. Instead, he says, when people bring these lawsuits saying you're invading my life wrongfully, and they go to court, and the president goes to the court and says, you know what, this is just too super secret that we can't even talk about it. So, sorry court, you can't adjudicate this. It's too super secret. Again, no limit on the government and the president's power. So when you have a system where part of the government says these limits on our power in the rule book don't apply to me, suddenly part of the government is a king. It has unlimited power. This king is exactly what our ancestors overthrew in order to make our union. This king is the evil our union was founded to get rid of, and now, in the person of the dear leader and his administration, that evil is back. The union is in dire distress, extreme danger. What can we do about this at this point? Unfortunately, I don't really have an answer for that, other than to emphasize that we need to talk about it. We need to bring it up, even though it's not comfortable to talk about scary political things with friends and family and coworkers and people we encounter in our everyday lives. But it needs to be brought up that the union is in dire distress, that the president is thrown out the rule book of our union and expects us all just to go along with it. One way would be to buy, read, and carry around so people can see it, this book by a lawyer named Glenn Greenwald called How Would a Patriot Act? Defending American Values from a President Run Amok. And he lays out what the president has been doing, taking powers that aren't his, ignoring the Constitution. He writes it very clearly. It's an important book. And carrying it around could be one way to get people to talk about it. Although if the brown shirts accost you when you have it, I would recommend you say you seized it from some goth kids or something. But unpleasant as it may be, we have to start challenging our co-citizens to think about the current issues and decide where they stand. Do we care about our union, or do we not care about our union? Does the fact that the president has undermined the values at the core of our union mean anything, or do we just go along and accept this new kind of king? Another way to think about it is that this is our revolution moment. This is like 1775, 1776, when Americans had to decide, you know what, I don't want to live under this absolute power that it can invade my life arbitrarily, that I have no control over, this unlimited power of government. Or do you decide, as some people did in the colonies, you know what, I'm happy to have a king, I'll be subject to it, I just hope he doesn't do too much, but you know what, I'm happy with the king. This is the choice that we face at this moment in time. The union is in dire distress. Are we going to defend our union, or are we going to capitulate to a new kind of king? This has been an urgent wartime dispatch from the Klamath Democracy Laboratory.